So I started thinking about how like everybody's life is kind of interesting. Like if you really think about it, because like I was reading Chuck Berry's autobiography, and just like he goes into like the history of his parents and just growing up, and I think in St. Louis, or Missouri, and it's just so interesting. Like everybody, lives in different times and everything is different, and that's what makes it interesting is everybody's lives are so different from everybody else's lives. Like when I think about my own life, I have a very unique upbringing, okay? Very unique upbringing. I mean, I grew up in like a Mexican neighborhood with like with like three like a twin brother and two older brothers. And I started thinking about just like really early memories of where I grew up and just how like interesting it was and how just like I don't know, just crazy interesting. Just like I was thinking about really early memories like when my grandpa was dying when I was 3 and me and my twin brother like like we were being babysat by like a group home across the street, and then we were being babysat by these people that own a resort on the Russian River while my mom went to LA. That was like a interesting memory because it was like our first time being separated from mama, when we were like 3, me and my brother. And also like having a twin brother, like we experienced everything. So like it's really easy to be like, hey, remember that time, blah blah blah, and like a lot of the time like my brother will remember like the same things that happened, you know what I mean? Like down to like details that are like so ornate. Um One of my vivid memories was like our house got robbed when I was like 3 or something, and I had this like tin. It was some kind of tin, like a cookie tin or something, and I kept a 50-cent piece in there, and that 50-cent piece meant so much to me, and it got robbed, right? And I just remember thinking like, oh my god, that's so freaking weird. Like this thing that I really liked, it's not here anymore. And I think it like maybe it kind of made me like sort of like unattached a little bit or something to like material things. I don't know, just that early kind of thing that happened. But there was bad things and there was good things. I remember when I was a kid and I we went to the horse races and I put $2 on. Well, I mean, I gave it to my parents to put it on the horse. I did an exacta, which is when you predict 2 horses in a row, and so I actually won like $52. And that to me was like a lot of money back then. Like put it in the bank account, you know what I mean? I had that money for a while. So yeah, just a lot of like I was just thinking of a lot of memories. I think whenever I come back to my folks' house, I think of a lot of like the early memories of like our next door neighbors we were really tight with. Like in this neighborhood, we were really tight with a lot of the people that aren't here anymore. So we're not like my folks aren't really like super tight with a lot of people around anymore here. But my dad goes to these like meetings of the neighborhood, like to get to know people. So maybe he's getting to know people, but back then it was like we had our whole family and then like there was other families, you know what I mean? Like there was like a next door neighbors where like they had 4 kids and we had 4 kids. It was just like, you know what I mean? They were a little younger than us, but you know what I mean? It was just like we all hung out and like on the streets and everything and like, played like football in the streets or whatever. You know, I remember like me and my brother, we went to this like nursery school at the fairgrounds when we were like 3. And I just remember riding those little like trikes around the pavilion area at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds, where now they have like the big like festivals there, like the big hemp festivals. Like we used to ride our little freaking little motorcycles around, not those little tricycles when you're a kid. Um, and just making friends when we were really young. Like I remember like going into kindergarten at the age of 5 and just like meeting a bunch of people that I would know for like the next decade. You know what I mean? It's just like I like that one day of going to kindergarten. You meet like so many people that you're gonna know for so long after that. It's so crazy, dude. Like I just remember. I remember seeing this guy Felipe. I remember seeing like Doggo. I remember like I met my friend Eddie. Like just like all these people that knew for a long time after that. And dude, I used to. So I got into this like gifted kids program thing. So I got to go to school a little bit later and get out a little later. And so I used to walk to school with my older brother. He is like 3 years older than me. And he had this friend, and like we would stop and play he would play video games like down by the fairgrounds. And then we would like walk by the 7-Eleven, and like some of the kids, not me and not my brother, but some of the kids would like they would take quarters out of there was like this video game thing, and the kids would take quarters out of them. You know what I mean? So that was like my first introduction to crime, but I didn't do it though. But but what's crazy though is that same 7-Eleven is still there on the same street. So we're talking about almost like 45 years ago. Same freaking 7-Eleven, dude. It's still there. They don't have the video games in there anymore, but that's just crazy. You know what I mean? Same thing. But like it's so funny that like when I was 5, I used to walk to school, which is like a couple miles away. Like kids these days, I don't think like a 5-year-old's walking to school anymore. You know what I mean? It's just not happening, you know? So like anyway, yeah, and then a lot of times we would drive, we would walk back from school or maybe take the bus sometimes. Yeah. I remember I remember my older brother, like one of my shirts was dirty, so he had like a shirt and he gave it to me. Like my older brothers were always like super protective of like me and my twin brother. Like one time some kid like picked on me and I told my brother, and my brother was like slapping the other kid. Because my older brothers, I feel like they got a little bit of karate training when they were young, so they were a little tougher. Um, yeah. So they were like, you know, super tough. Especially like my brother Joey was always very like ready to fucking fight if somebody fucked with me. Which I think is really cool to have a brother like that. And it's just really like, I don't know. I like if the thing is, I always feel like if I have kids, I want to have more than one because I like the whole sibling experience. And even though sometimes growing up was hard, like with older brothers, sometimes like now I really like my older brothers. Sometimes I used to like feel like I always just felt like I don't know, it was hard to make them think you're cool or something like that. But now I'm just glad that I had older brothers and a twin brother, especially. That was like really special. But anyway, just thinking about. Oh, dude, I remember there was a girl I was friends with across the street, and um, I went to her house once, and we were playing, and then she had this drunk uncle come over, and he started causing a commotion. Like he started pushing over bookshelves and like yelling and stuff. So we went and hid in the bathroom. Just like crazy little like weird memories like that. What else? Like I remember when my aunt and uncle came back from Europe, and my cousin, who's like a year younger than me, and uh, they had been in Europe for like a year, and they came back with like a van again that they brought back from Germany. And I just remember being like so excited because I hadn't seen them in a long time. Like my aunt, my mom's sister, like I was like really close with. I used to always say, "Oh, I wish you had moved to Santa Rosa. You could live in this house down the street," because they lived in L.A. That's another thing is we used to always go to LA like every April, every Easter break we would drive to LA. Like we would leave at like 4 in the morning, you know, and we get to LA at like we get to like LA, like where we're going like around noon or so. And sometimes like there was a couple of times where like our car broke down. Like we drove a 50. My dad drove a '54 Chevy. It was like really old, and one time like it broke down right by the grapevine, and yeah, it was just like crazy stuff. I remember one time my mom was driving. Actually, my parents had like two '54 Chevys, and one of the '54 Chevys, me and my brother and my mom were in the car in Montgomery Village in Santa Rosa, and the steering wheel came off somehow. She didn't know what the heck to do. It's like so weird, you know. But what else? It's like going to school. I had a really good teachers, a lot of really good teachers. I had this old white-haired kindergarten teacher named Miss Hanson, and I used to stay after school, and she would like tell me about Jesus and tell me about that I should be a good kid and not curse and all this stuff like that. And I don't know, she was really nice to me. And Mrs. Easterday, Mrs. Clark, Mrs. Dugan, Miss Acuna. Well, that's funny. I didn't think about that, but I had all women teachers up until fifth grade. And then fifth grade, Mr. Cadell, and then sixth grade, Mr. Whiteside. So it was cool how, like, you know, when you're a kid, you have that one teacher for the whole year. You really get to know that teacher, you know. And I feel like, you know, we had a very diverse school, and it wasn't any controversy about it. Everybody kind of got along. There wasn't any racial weirdness, you know, because we were just kids. And, you know, there might have been an incident or two, but it just wasn't a lot. You know what I mean? It was just like nobody cared. You know, when I noticed that, like, things changed was more in like junior high, where there was more division. You know, I think there's more ego and more division in junior high. But in elementary school where I went was very diverse. You had a lot of black kids, a lot of Mexican kids, a lot of even kids from Cambodia, kids from Vietnam. I noticed we never really had like Thai kids though. I think like maybe there wasn't as much immigration from Thailand because Thailand's so freaking awesome. Nobody wants to leave Thailand. Um, but like you know, we had kids from all over, you know, and then we had like you know, we had like kids from the suburbs, like the other side of the tracks. But I would say it was mostly like working class, you know. Um, yeah. So then, when me and my brother went to junior high, a lot of the kids that were from the other side of the track went to another different junior high. So a lot of our friends, you know, that we knew went to a different junior high and high school. But yeah, also like we used to play soccer. We from the age we played. Me and my twin brother, we played soccer from like the age of 5. Man, with it, they got us out there playing soccer young, you know. And then I remember my dad taking us to get crew cuts when we were like 8, getting our first haircuts. Um, it was right over on not that far from here, like just a few blocks, you know. And what else? Oh, I remember one time. So the neighborhood that we grew up in, it used to be much worse than it is now. And one time there was people walking down the bike path by our house, shooting off rifles, and we all got on the floor and ducked. But anyway, stuff like that. You know what I mean? There was a lot of violence in the neighborhood. Like I got chased home a few times. I don't think it was as bad as like my dad, where he grew up in L.A. But like, So I think he never felt like it was bad. You know what I mean? But we definitely had some like crazy people. We had some crazy neighbors. There was a guy that he was kind of a crazy biker guy, a couple doors down, and they had a pit bull. And one time the pit bull was attacking our dog, and so my mom threatened the dog with a baseball bat to get away. And then the guy came out. He's like, "You better not touch my dog. Like, if I see your dog, I'm gonna put a slug in her." Just because my mom was trying to protect our dog from this pit bull. So I don't know. There were some kind of like unsavory characters. There was like a mental hospital across the street. I remember seeing these guys kind of beating up on this kind of weird mental patient. So there was like a lot of weird, disturbing stuff. But I don't know. It's like kind of like a lot of interesting characters and stuff. When I think about it, it's definitely like makes for kind of a colorful upbringing. But it's also where like, so we grew up on Grand Avenue, which is like where Greg Saris wrote this book called Grand Avenue about our street, because there are a lot of Native Americans from this area, right? Grand Avenue. And so then they turned it into a movie. And in fact, a friend of mine was an extra in the movie. They filmed part of it at the high school, but I don't think they filmed much of it in this neighborhood, actually, which is kind of funny. But I also like wanted to be an actor when I was a kid. That was like the first thing I wanted to be. And I remember when they filmed Peggy Sue Got Married, I wanted to try to be in it, but I was only like, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something. But I was in a lot of plays and stuff when I was a kid. I was in some radio commercials too. Just because it's not like my parents were pushing me. I really was pushing myself. Like I went out and called the radio stations. I had a book about acting, and it said you should call radio stations and try to get in radio commercials. So I did that, and it actually worked. And I was in like a bunch of plays when I was a kid. And then I got really into guitar playing more when I was like 12, 13, and that's kind of like been my trajectory. But I still actually would like to do some acting. Anyway, so yeah. But just thinking about when I was a kid and all the little adventures we used to have, like we used to just, me and my brother and Eddie and his brother, we would just go biking all over town. We would play soccer, we would play football, we would play basketball. We'd, I don't know, just a lot of stuff like that. And then in junior high, we kind of got a different set of friends. And I started this thing called YOW, which means young and wild, which is like, we're going to do these little adventures. Like one of the adventures was we walked on these train tracks for several miles from, I think it was Windsor to Healdsburg. And then our friend's dad picked us up. One was like, we're going to go on this big bike ride. You know what? Now that I think about it, there's a kid we grew up with named Jason, and he was very adventure minded. And he was like, "Hey, we should go on a trip where we like, I don't know." He wanted to go on some kind of trip, and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." You know what I mean? And he's like, "You guys aren't adventurous," so it kind of got me thinking about being more adventurous. And then I saw that movie, The Goonies, when I was like 9 or 10. And so I was like, I want to start like doing adventurous stuff, right? I want to like travel. And so I started like trying to do like, stuff. Then when I was 13, I went on my first Greyhound trip because I went with my aunt and uncle to Tahoe. And I took the Greyhound back, and I was like, wow, that's cool. I can just take a bus back if I want to go somewhere. It's not that hard. And I started, we would take buses to the city. By 14, 15, we were like going to shows, we were going, 16 especially was when I saw a lot of shows, But you just think about all the life you live when you're a kid, and it's just fucking crazy, man. So much that you do when you're a kid. Because I was thinking about it, and I was like, the memories were flooding back. The memories were just flooding back, and I was just thinking how much was packed into my youth. You're just kind of living life. You don't think about how much you're doing, but you're doing so much every day. You're going to school every day. You're interacting with tons of people every day. You're doing your hobbies. You're doing your home. You know what I mean? You're just doing a lot when you're a kid, And I sort of feel like what happened with me was I went through sort of a depression around high school, and then I kind of dropped out, and, then I was like kind of college here, college there. But I sort of feel like what happened with me was I lost that structure that I had, because I would have a job for a while, and then I would get bummed out by it, or like I didn't have a lot of structure in my life for a long time, And a lot of times when I did have structure, it kind of bummed me out. Like if I had a job or something, and I'm like, this kind of sucks doing the same thing every day. So I think that the key for me is I need to be very discipline oriented to get things done, because I don't always do things in a timely manner, right? But for some reason, I do have a huge creative output, and that's because a lot of the stuff that I do that's creative isn't done on a specific timeline, right? So like when I was in Japan, I wrote like probably 20 songs, right? Which doesn't sound like that much, but it's definitely more than it's like 2 albums worth of material. And I did that like without trying that hard. And I did that playing the songs over and over again, memorizing the songs. So I'm definitely driven in a certain way when it comes to the arts, when it comes to expression, when it comes to music, when it comes to writing. But I'm not used to say like, okay, like if I'm writing for a TV show and they're like, this has to be done by this day or something. But actually, I think that when it comes to writing or when it comes to music, I probably could fulfill deadlines pretty well, because it's not hard for me to work on stuff like that, But I don't know. I just examining my life as a kid, something happened where I kind of went from like super structured life all the time, and then kind of like left to my own devices, sort of like, then I'm like 21, I moved to LA. I'm kind of trying to do acting. I'm kind of like working here, working there. I mean, just like when I think about my whole life, it's been a lot of moving around. It's been a lot of inconsistency, right? And I'm just trying to be very honest with myself, because I'm going to be 50 next year, and I want to be able to look back on my life and go, oh, I accomplished a lot of things, right? And I think in some ways in my 40s, I was being very patient about things. I was kind of trying to make things happen, but I wasn't being pushy about it. I was just like, I'm going to try to do this and maybe this. But the thing is, like, I was kind of like, I was kind of waiting for other people to kind of do things for me. And, and not that I was waiting for people, but sometimes people would come along and want to help me with something. And so I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to happen. But then things would kind of take longer. So I think that what I'm trying to say is that I need to be more proactive, because things don't just happen unless you make them happen, right? And I'm sort of a mystical person. I feel like stuff just happens sometimes, but like, and a lot of times stuff does kind of happen. Like when I think about the last 2 years, a lot has happened for me in 2 years, So it's not like, it's weird, because it's like, I haven't been consistent, but when I look at things, I feel like I've had a pretty full life in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, I feel sad that I haven't been married or like, had a family of my own. That makes me a little bit sad. But like, when I think about it, I've gotten to travel a lot. I've gotten to meet a lot of people. I've gotten to play a lot of music. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not like I've had a boring life or something. I just feel like I need it to be a little bit more consistent, a little bit more dreams into reality, you know? So, like, I was in LA. I was kind of mixing with people that were doing a lot of movie type of stuff, and then I took some screenplay writing classes. And then, you know, my mid 20s, doing some traveling to Europe, this and that. I went to Europe twice in my 20s. And then at the age of 30, really moving back to LA and really trying to make things happen in LA. And kind of like making some things happening, but not really in the way that I wanted. And sort of being frustrated with the whole thing, But then also doing some interesting things. So it's like a combo, right? It's like I haven't accomplished all my dreams, but I feel like the dreams that I've had have taken me on an interesting journey.